Welcome. We should be live. We should be live. Welcome, beautiful soul. SOLI Deo Gloria. Hopefully hopefully this new mic is sounding a little bit better. I have a $500 microphone, and it's too sensitive for this current area. So we'll see. This is I think an $80 microphone, but we'll see how it goes. I'm super anal about audio, so I do my best, but I guess we're not really talking about audio, are we, today? We're talking about, what are we talking about? The truth of the Akashic Records. Reincarnation and soul memory. Actually, a good friend of mine asked me this question, or asked me to go in depth on this topic many months ago. And for whatever reason, I guess it slipped my mind. I had intended to address it. And so, what better time than now, right? So, thank you for joining. And if you have any questions or anything to add in the chat, by all means, just pop it in there. And when I'm done sort of going through my thing, I'll jump in and have a look. Where to begin? So, what is the Akashic record? So, the Akashic record could also be called the word, right? It's actually what you are. This is something that most psychics and other practitioners are not necessarily aware of, is that you are the record itself, living and breathing your record. So what does that exactly mean, right? Like, what are we talking about? What does that mean? kind of weird. What do you mean I'm the record? So as small as even a single cell within you holds the memory of your Akash, your soul's memory, the lineage you've inherited in this particular incarnation, and many other side things, skin, like culture, like race type stuff, all of that stuff gets accumulated into you as the baby being born, right? So that's part of the Akash that shows up in the physical, the shape of us. That's how I think it's called palmistry works. It's the same thing. Astrology is a mirror of that, like where we were born, at what time, and where were the planets. All of this is sort of an effort to show and symbolize to the entity that, see, you're the stars. They align with you. The cells align with you. All that you are is precisely as you were, bred to be and sort of planned to be, you could say. We can't like escape our Akash. We can't not be it. It can't be that way. And so most psychics, most you can almost look anywhere and people will be like, yeah, I do Akashic record readings and stuff. And I would love to say that that's authentic. And I would just say that in my experience, most of them are not really actually entering the records, the Hall of Records. What they're doing is reading the Auric Akash. This is the energy that's in the entity that's like being held. So they're not actually going into the Hall of Records. That's an entire different. You could almost say that like the same way Christ consciousness is like a frequency, the Hall of Records is like another frequency. It seems to be a component to or accessible from a very pure Christ consciousness, which is why someone like Jesus, when he becomes wide awake, is aware of who's betraying him and what's going on. He's aware of, because he's reading the Akash directly. Most psychics, they're accessing energy fields, and they may even do varied practices to enter the Akashic records. And these are more close to the correct way to enter. However, we always have to recognize that there's distortion when anyone's entering. It's the same that we've talked about on the channel before, like with channeling, my channeling, other people's channeling, Cryon or Bashar or the Law of One, whatever it is. The instrument distorts it. Now, in the Law of One, the instrument's unconscious, so the instrument's not really distorting it so much. But when we're dealing with the Akash, we're dealing with the record of what we are and what we've accumulated. Like our shape, our appearance, our like what we're into is all formed by the Akash of our past lives and all of our soul memory. The soul doesn't attempt to hold on to crappy things. What this means is that an elder soul, or a soul that's gone through a lot of experience, has many skills, right? They tend to be good at most things, or if they try, they can do it well, at least well, passably well. This is because the soul memory in reincarnation just keeps growing that way. And it may lay dormant. So like we might not realize that we're a writer until the Akash of that gets activated. And we're like, wow, suddenly I can write. And that's sort of how it works. So it opens the Akash as our soul expands into infinity. As we begin to understand that we're everything and all of the lifetimes are sort of concurrent, even that we're all of this. Whoa, wow, that's a lot, right? But when our consciousness and the light we're holding can encapsulate this, can live with this without major psychosis or mania or weird things going on, like the more we're able to feel all of that information from all lives simultaneously, the more awareness is presented to us of our own Akash, you could say. And we have sort of individual Akash, collective Akash, and then universal Akash, you could say. I'm trying to simplify it. It's not that simple at all. It's actually very, very complex, but in this density of consciousness, we can't actually properly see it. Like we're so cut off here. Even the humans that heighten their states can't properly perceive these things, at least from what I've seen so far. And if they can't really talk about them. But we do have access to our collective Akash, and we're also, because we have many collectives that have shown up here as volunteers, we have access to their Akash. So we're seeing the Syrian, Pleiadian, Arcturian. We're seeing all of these various illusory stories. That's the other thing, is that Akash is memory of illusion. It's memory of the separation, right? So there's sort of like this aspect of the Akash that is just like the play or the shadow, the trick of the light. And then there's an area of the Akash that's much more real and true, which is the soul's memory. And then there's the area of the Akash which moves into like divine memory, sort of how the creator observes. And that's kind of what we're attempting to learn, is to observe how the creator observes. That's how we end up holding peace, right, in our day-to-day lives. But it's important to understand these things because the Akash actually, and what it is, actually informs our experience. It's what draws everything we experience to us as well, right? It's our story, you could say, that we're living. So if we can understand a bit of our story in our past, then we can get an idea of where we might be looking to correct things, where we might be looking to adjust. So I'll share just in one of my past lives, I believe it was like a Roman Catholic priest. The Akash opens to us when we're ready for it. I was not trying to read this. I picked up a Bible, and just walking, I wasn't thinking of anything. I just kind of clutched it to my heart like this, like in my chest. And this action triggered in me, like, I think the word is somatic. response, the whole body began to tremble, and I began to remember suddenly being a priest. I think Roman Catholic, and realizing how in love with God I was, but how manipulative I was being to my people that were following me and listening to me. I wasn't like being authentic with them. I didn't agree with a lot of the church teachings and things, but I was too scared to speak up or step out of the line, so to speak. And I think this lifetime happened like very close prior to this one, and this becomes aware to it became aware to me when, or I became aware of it, I should say, because I needed to heal my relationship with God itself, right? The one. I didn't realize that I had sort of held on to this, like I dedicated that whole priestly life to God, but I couldn't get past some of the fear. And it was one of the reasons that I sort of ended up reincarnating, getting stuck a bit in the illusion. It's one of the only real risks of wandering into sorrow. When we're called as volunteers, we wander toward the sorrow, almost like a cell going to heal a part of the body that's wounded in the universe. This is where wanderers go, and brothers and sisters of sorrow. And so, anyways, when I dedicated that life to God and then got to the end of it all, and I was sort of like blaming God. Why didn't you correct me? Why didn't you give me the strength to be more courageous? Or, sort of blaming God for it. When in truth, I was being told the whole time. I could feel it. That's why I was so unsettled by it all. But I had to like remember that to help me in this lifetime forgive all of that. Like in this lifetime, I was resistant to any church, anything, because of my experience in that lifetime, if that makes sense. So where we're very resistant or sensitive, you could say, and where we're very effulgent or like elevated, that's where we've found successes and benefits and glories or troubles, right? We've found troubles and problems and sorrows in the other way. And we begin to learn that actually what we're doing is we're actually replaying the same tale over and over and over and over again. As a soul, we begin to notice it. Like we'll have memories of our various lifetimes and begin to notice, oh my gosh, I'm doing like the same thing. I'm just getting a bit better slowly. And in this lifetime, most of us, especially if you're listening to this now, we've gone, I'm done. Oh, I'm done. It's over, sort of. The Akash still continues. It's still a thing. The story's still there, but the soul has realized. When the soul enters the earth sphere to incarnate, it passes through the veiling regardless of its age or experience. So wandering souls, we get caught in the same sort of web of forgetfulness. Maybe one day I'll go into the forgetfulness, but it's an interesting mystery. Many thoughts about that. Why do we forget? Right? So maybe we'll do that. And that brings me to my next point. I actually meant to say at the beginning, if you guys are like at all interested in any topics of metaphysics in any way, I probably have something to say or bring in about it. So just email me at seanthehero1111@gmail.com and just give me a question, and I'll try to do more of these like inspire viewer or community inspired questions, because when I'm just on my own deciding, I try to follow guidance, but it'd be kind of cooler if people said, hey, why don't we talk about this particular topic today, and then I can go from there. Something I wanted to try anyway. So because the Akash is always like a unfolding in front of us, and it's a repeat of the past. We can use our explorations into the Akash so much more profoundly. And I want to share with people that you're already accessing it all of the time, all of the friggin' time. If you've ever like watched an anime and been like, wow, I love Japanese culture, and like got into it, like probably you were exploring part of your soul memory that had spent time in Japan. Probably. Like there's a reason that you're intrigued by the language, that you're like, oh my gosh, these beautiful, the cherry blossoms and the, oh, I can almost smell it. Like there's a reason for all of that, and it's the Akash. And that's why racism is so kind of hilarious, really. It's kind of absurd, right? We've all been like all the races pretty much, right? We've all been hopping around, going all over the place. That's what we do. Right? Like we want varied experience. So we try the same story in like different variables, and one of the variables is race and culture. Like we particularly go all over the place. We don't just stay in like one family line the whole time. No, we don't do that. Um, we just don't. It just doesn't make sense for the efficiency of consciousness exploring itself. It wouldn't make sense to be tethered to these concepts. That's just the human mind that likes to think, oh, my family is this, and it grew, and so probably I was like, even for me, I'm like, I was a druid back then, and I think I was, but I think I've like come for full circle. I think I began as a druid or druid type thing, did a whole bunch of stuff, and now I'm back into a druid heritage or line, you could say, druidic, Celtic line. Like, we often complete that cycle, right? Like we complete the cycle. So we start off somewhere, and then we go through a bunch of stuff, and then we end up sort of where we began, usually. And then we do that exact same thing again, but from a transcended level of consciousness where it looks entirely different than it did before. So it doesn't get boring, because consciousness is always ascending to the next dimension, you could say, or density, which purviews the creation in a different lens, you could say, or perception. So people talk about like new earth and a different earth, and there's dimensions to the earth and the timelines we're on, and those things are true. They are real things. However, the timeline is the perception, like the the beliefs held in the soul will decide the timeline, and then there are only infinite timelines, right? It's only infinite. So you're going all the ways, all the time, really. But the earth doesn't, it's not like a different earth. It's the same entity that's purviewed from a higher density of consciousness. So it's where you're in hell, perhaps, but it doesn't seem like hell, because I am the king of this place. Wow, I'm here as a son of God. All of this is for me. Wow, it's a different experience. That would be the fifth dimensional or fifth density consciousness purviewing the third dimensional or third density reality, right? Heaven here, kingdom here on earth. We have moments of this. I don't hold this all day. I do see this and have seen it. So that's why I speak to it. Everything that I speak to is because of experience. Otherwise, who would I be to say anything, right? I'm just talking about ideas. But that's really all reality is anyway. It's just the imagination, pretty much. God's imagination, we could say. So ideas are real, basically. Once we think of something and imagine it, it is somehow, somewhere, on some plane. The next level of it, so after we get to like the soul part, we start to learn like the soul has done all of a whole bunch of different things all over the place. Even if we were volunteers, we probably came in early because we want to understand the culture we're about to try and raise too. Like you have to realize, we have to realize that the soul doesn't understand humans if it hasn't been around humans. Like it doesn't get it. So if we came from somewhere like Venus, which many of us did, Venus was harmony, primarily harmony. This fighting thing didn't really happen. So if we came from Venus as souls that had graduated already ascended, and then came back because we followed the sorrow to help heal and raise planetary consciousness in the same logos that we reside in, right? The sun, Venus, like our sister planet, really. So of course, from Venus, we're going to go. And in fact, I think we had priority to be allowed in. Just because of the closeness to the logos. The easier it is for us to embrace the archetypes because we have the same archetypal expressions and it's the same logos. So we didn't have to learn archetypes, but we had to learn humans because humans are nuts. So we had to spend lifetimes here to learn humans and to shatter that naivete that we have from Venus. We're so loving and innocent. We, as an entire society evolving into sixth density, the whole time, so loving, so peaceful, that it became like silly, like naive. So then Earth, we can't bring that same naivete. So we had to go through usually several incarnations here. And I'm not sure the number. I wouldn't give it a number, but we went through a bunch. And then the Akash grows into the map or the collection map of your higher self, right? That has multiple souls going through many incarnations simultaneously. It's not just this one soul. It's like many souls because it's a collective. So our higher self is some type of, if we've invested enough of our consciousness into this sphere, the higher self of this sphere is one higher self, you could say, that's helping to guide and manage every being here. The logos and logoi, sub-logoi are hierarchical in this way, down to down to down, and it's all spheres of consciousness that sort of connect with each other. The bigger the sphere, the more empowered the sphere, the more influence it has on the sphere below it. And that just goes down and down and down ad infinitum, like forever. And that's why in the microcosm of everything, we see the macrocosm. That's why I was saying earlier that the Akash is literally like in your cellular being, not just your cells and everything, but your everything about you. And then the Akash finally ends in God's understanding of us, God's understanding, not of us, but of the memory, of the illusion. What did God get out of it? And we'll get into questions. So Dan says, so is our higher self the sonship? What a lovely question, Dan. Thank you. Bringing up the sonship. Yeah. That would be a good way to describe the Earth's higher self. Like, we share the sonship as entities. So as an entity, we can collect and attribute ourselves to the evolution and raising of planetary consciousness on many spheres, right? Like there are some of us that know that we've done this many, many times on many, many planets. Those of us that feel that will understand that this one's different, probably, in many different ways. However, the sonship, there's always, on each planet, there's always a sonship. which sort of is the fifth density consciousness. Because when we rise into the Christ consciousness, we're in the sonship. We sometimes lose it. We lose that, right? We forget that we're in the sonship, and we're like, oh, but I feel like crap today. But then we come back up and we're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm back. I'm back, guys. Okay. All right, I'm back. We kind of pop in and out usually. This is like as the consciousness is like bubbling and popping, and as it's boiling, really. It really is sort of boiling, and we're popping in and out of these higher vibrations. And some of us are having really bananas experiences and kundalini awakenings, and just, we're seeing celebrities wake up, which we've talked about before. We're seeing all this. The consciousness is clearly waking up. And so we get glimpses of the sonship. The sonship is when it, atonement, right? Oneness, at one mint. It's at one mint with God. So it's pure Christ consciousness. And we feel it usually, like, if we're lucky, we can get some glimpses of it daily, if we're lucky. If we're not lucky, if we're holding a good vibe with the world, we can experience it daily. To hold it all day long, it can be done, of course. Certainly, it wouldn't limit anything, but I it'd be challenging to hold that frequency all day, every day. I think, at least for me. So what I tend to recommend, though, is we pull into like the be still and know the peace of God. So we remember. What I try to do is like go back and be like, oh, I'm back when I felt it before. And then that sort of arises it in me. Like I just sort of recall the feeling of it and bring it to me. Like I manifest it into my being. And I ask for God to aid that. I had an experience of it today. Actually, it was ridiculous. But one of those sort of large, expansive experiences that we have. Yeah, the sonship is, I would say, the Earth collective. I'm gonna scroll up to look at the more of the comments, but I would say it is the Earth collective. Yes, to be most clear, the sonship is the Christ, or it is the name for divinity in us here on this sphere. And so there are different names for it all across the universe, and different ways of seeing it. We see it as like the sonship being the collective unification of the consciousness of Earth. So we're not going to have like Sean thinks this and Dan thinks this in our communities going forward. Like eventually, what will happen is telepathically, without really talking about anything, we'll all be on the same page, pretty much. And we'll be able to see through each other's lenses if we need to, for any reason. It's all going to be open and transparent. Is where the next graduation happens. Right now, we're just really opening the heart, is what's sort of blossoming open now, is the heart and the dark night of the soul. Later, we're going to experience the same activations that people are having individually, like opening up, oh, I can like hear thoughts and whoa of other people, I can see stuff, and the Earth itself, like the whole collective's doing the same process, right? But it's at a different kind of rate, you could say. So, yeah, so it's all going to change. Everything's going to change. I don't know timelines on that. I just know that that's what's happening. I can see that that's what's happening. What's written in the plan, you could say. So when people are talking about timelines and ships picking us up and weird things like that, I mean, sure, that stuff's real. Like ships pick us up. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, absolutely. But no positive entity is going to interfere with consciousness. Excuse me. Consciousness evolution. No positive entity will interfere with a lower density being. It doesn't matter what that being's saying. It doesn't matter what the human self is saying, like consciously. The soul is not wanting its free will to be manipulated. Its sovereignty is not a question to the soul. The soul is God, sovereign and free. It does not even like consider that something else could come and heal it or something. Like it's not even interested. Not truly, not truly. So, you know, if there's a group of entities saying that we're going to come pick you up in our ship, it's sort of like if I show up on your lawn, I'm like, hey, I got candy in my van. You want to get in there? You like candy? Right? It's the same type of thing. Same type of thing. So I'm just going to scroll up because I missed some of the chat. I saw Dan's and I really enjoyed that question, so I jumped to it. Sarah says, very cool talk. I enjoy the subject. Are you familiar with the theosophical initiations? Your story about being a priest reminded me of it and how we are called into each initiation to go further. I'm familiar with multiple different styles of initiations, not specifically theosophical initiations. Are you referring to the 33 degrees and the spine and the gateways in the spine, the 33? Or is that Rosicrucian? To be honest with you, I haven't studied as much as it might seem like I've studied. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. Dan says, yeah, good subject for me. I have no knowledge in this area. I wouldn't say that I have any knowledge in this area. I'm still discovering what this all means. I can see what I've seen, but yeah, I don't know. And actually, that's the perspective I advocate for. Is I don't know. Sean doesn't know what any of this is. Sean lets spirit come tell him, and it's sort of telling me with you now, right? This is not like I've written this down. And it's very strange for me. I never know really what I'm going to say or anything, or what's going to happen. And I haven't researched the topic really. Like I've read some stuff here and there. I did read years ago a book on how to access the Akashic Records, but it was nonsense. It wasn't real. I read it and I'm like, no, that's not real. Sarah says, how do you feel about the theory that other planetary spheres are actually past or future incarnations of the Earth? And the regressive timelines that some ETs have taken are trying to... Oh, I think I know where you're going with that question. I think it got cut off. YouTube only allows a little bit, but yeah, like, okay. This is a little out there for some, but the Earth was intended as to be a Eden, to be a heavenly place for us to store a lot of different genetic makeup as a collection of souls, right? Despite what it might seem like, third density souls offer a tremendous amount of energy. People don't know or realize the power that they're giving. So when peaceful beings created the human race, and it was not evolution, not in the general sense of what evolution means. The human race was planted here, seeded here purposefully by other beings. So it's true that if you consider that these other places are light years away, right? They're already in the future or the past, or however you want to see that. It's not, they're already separate. So our logos is like, it's part of a collection in our spiraling galaxy. The closer we are to these other entities, the more close the archetypal expressions are from the logos that they're orbiting. So for us, it's soul or the sun. It's the reason that we call soul soul is from that word. That's the sonship, the son. That's what son of God means. But the timelines are, yeah, they're parallel. They're parallel basically. Past and future isn't quite relevant in it, because in order to get there, you have to travel through the past or future to even get there. If that makes sense, you have to travel through consciousness. Or if you use the technology that some of the Orions had, as well as Sirius actually used this, was like the cryo sleep stuff that you've seen probably in movies. They freeze the body. Third density civilizations would do that, and Sirius is they are third, probably graduating into fourth now, probably along with us. Maybe our brothers and sisters is sort of how I feel about it. But they're technologically ahead of us and more peaceful. So they're, I believe, here to aid in that, because they're actually doing the same thing. But they're ahead of us. Like the transition into fourth density is much bigger than people think. It's a big whole thing. Think of how long we've been in third density, and third density is quick. Third density is like, 10% of the length of fourth. It's like a highly volatile catalytic time that consciousness decides: love or fear, light or nothing, darkness. That's where that decision happens, and it happens that's why third density is called the choice. But yeah, kind of rambling, but yeah. So there are many ET races trying to take that energy that I was talking about and come in and corrupt stuff, but they want it's sort of like if you had a whole bunch of cows, you don't want your cows to die. You don't want anything to happen to your cows. Like, they're your cows, they're your assets. So it's almost like they have cows, but some of the cows are like just disappearing. And they're like, okay, we got to put up fences, but no, the cows are just disappearing. When we reach a certain frequency in our consciousness, we're not really affected by the synthetic and the energized frequencies of the Orion group or the other negative entities that are attempting to manipulate. We're not like driven by that. We don't really respond. So the manipulation tactics have to happen from, instead of fourth density, they have to happen from fifth density, which means that almost the entire complex has to focus on someone. Not the entire, but a big portion of power has to be put on a particular person or a particular target of some kind. And there's just too many people that are awake. So we all get sort of cycles of these waves of either temptation to fall into sadness and darkness, or we get waves of more direct, like almost the whole world suddenly spins against you type things as well. This happens, but some of that's just karmic as well. It's hard to tell from the limited human perspective. It's hard to discern, is this a karmic thing or is this like a manipulation thing in the now? Not really relevant to karma. However, it is still manipulating on the wounds that exist. So it still is relevant to the Akash and the karma regardless, because the wound, the ability to be manipulated by one of these frequencies exists because we have not healed that yet. It's our belief in the lack of wholeness, you could say, that inspires. It's our Akash that inspires us to be vulnerable somewhere. I think I said that earlier, that where we're sensitive, right? That's our Akash. It's something happened before, either this life or others, right? Sarah says, ooh, spheres theory. Venus is a future incarnation of Earth where beings reside who passed the initiation we are currently facing here on Earth. Makes a ton of sense to me. I'll say that I feel that Venus is already done and is doing what you said, getting ready to do it again. I believe that the planets do this over and over. That's what I believe. So I think you're right, but I think it happened also before. Venus is just like ahead of us. So right now, it's in I don't know what state it's in, but whatever state it's in, it's acting as sort of like a satellite or a beacon of a particular frequency, which is really just a pure feminine love, nurturing harmony. That's really all Venus, the morning star, offers. And it's really funny. I think actually it was you who said there was Luciferian chaos or something. You mentioned it in another comment, Sarah. And Lucifer is the morning star. There's a lot of really interesting things about the morning star to learn about and to discover in the symbolism and how it all relates, and where the fear came from as well. Sarah says, I had a beautiful experience a couple years ago while I was in a dark night of the soul where Sanat Kumara and Lady Venus anointed me with iridescent light that coiled up like a beehive on my head. Bees are related to Venus. Yes. And also, Lady Venus would be Lucifer, right? Lucifer is a female. Most people aren't aware of that. At least that's my experience of Lucifer. A female, I call her Lady Lucy, actually, similar to Lady Venus. The dawn bringer, the light bringer. I don't worship her in any way, right? It's just an energy. It's a frequency. Sorry, I'm just getting caught up on the comments. Oh, I'm going to share this. In esoterica, bees are commonly associated with Venus symbolically. Hives are made of hexagonal structure, and 6 is the number Venus. Balance, nourishment, and love in numerology. I didn't understand the association before I had an experience, but I did a lot of research after and found a lot with bees and Venus. I feel like the sun is really important. Jesus is the Son of God and embodied the solar logos. We are solar beings in a solar system and incarnate through the sun. Every star reflects light from sun. Yeah, exactly. So, like, that's why the indigenous and all the early people praised the sun. It was the obvious source of all life. Without it, everything couldn't be. So intuitively, everyone understood that that's God, right? Eventually, what happened is we realized, oh, that's what we are. We're all one. Oh, okay. And that's when we started to have visitation from extraterrestrials. Basically, once as a collective, we became not just us. And that's the great thing about it is the humans can die off and whatever. The consciousness of Earth rises. Oh, unity, oneness, one. Wow, one. It starts to call like the Earth itself. You could think of the Earth as like a daughter of the sun, right? And the daughter of the sun is waking up, going, whoa. But before her waking up, she was screaming in agony and sorrow, screaming for a long time. It's very sad, actually. I don't know if any of you have had these, but I've had dreams and feelings of the Earth's sorrow. Not just, Dr. Hawkins talks about this as well. Sometimes we'll have an experience of feeling the weight of the entire Earth's sorrow, and it's just all-encompassing sorrow. It has no source or anything. It's just all of the sorrow everywhere at once. And it's sort of a nightmare, honestly. But in that, we can find the sweetness. There's a reason that we get called to that sorrow. And it's because usually we are souls that enjoy fixing stuff. We enjoy correcting illusion. We enjoy highlighting and demonstrating truth. We enjoy being loving in the face of scary things. We sort of take pride sometimes in our ability to bring chillness to situations, or at least openness or something. Like we have some different way of doing it, but you know. Hello, Sean. Well, I missed that. Are you aware Lucifer and Satan are two different entities? Can you elaborate for the unenlightened? Hi, Strangeness. Thank you for joining. I don't think I've seen you here before. Nice to see you. So, yeah, they're separate entities. Satan isn't, I wouldn't say Satan is even an entity. Satan just means, literally, in actual definition, it just means the adversary. It's not an actual entity. Satan, like you can even, in the Bible, you'll hear Jesus refer to Peter as Satan. But he's not talking to Peter, right? He's talking to himself. He's talking to the adversary within himself, which is attempting to agree with, a statement that Peter's made. So Satan is the adversary to the truth of God, which is like perfection, we could say. Love, truth, perfection. The adversary is anything that opposes that pretends, basically. It's a pretender, a trickster, but it's not an actual being. Lucifer is a being, and there are many magicians and writers and people of all the ages that have written very many things about this entity. But yeah, you said they're androgynous. That's true. That's true. However, when I perceive Lucifer, I perceive a female-ish being. That doesn't mean that it's a she or a female. These entities are androgynous. All of them are androgynous. Archangel Michael is not a dude. It's not a bro, right? They're all androgynous. At this density of consciousness, we have gender, sex in physicality that's manifest. In the next density, there's no gender. There's no such thing as gender. It's all androgynous, all of it. So, of course, an entity that's up in sixth, which is where Lucifer sits, it's androgynous, of course. Its appearance, for me, is a female-ish appearance, I should say. So that's the better way to phrase it. Thank you for talking about that. I appreciate it. Dan says, is Ra from Venus, from the Venus Collective? Yeah. Ra is Venus. Or at least when Venus was asked to say, who are you, right? Who are we? The sun. They identified themselves as the sun to the Egyptians. And they were like tall bird people, basically. But they identified themselves as being beings from the sun. And that's where that story started to come from. And they began to initiate the Anak and humans into initially the Anak. And when they initiated the Anak and or the Jotun, the giants, they were like, nah, fam, we're not giving this to the peasants. They don't know what to do with it. And to be honest with you, they were probably right. Like, not what they did, not that what people have done is right, but you can't awaken beings that are not ready to be awakened. You can't push them, you can't force them. And that's what Ra was trying to show them, was that you can just bring them into the pyramid and put them into this isolation, in the king and queen's chamber positions and have this healing occur. And when they tried to do that, the people that came out of it, the Anak initially, just were like, oh, no, these people aren't ready for this at all. And they were probably right at the time, probably correct. So they began to become the ones who took charge of the planet. And then they did wacky shit. Sarah says, yes, I said Luciferian chaos. I meant people who reside prominently in the upper chakras and abandon the body to do the escapist spiritual thing. And Ahriman pulls people into the lower chakras. Both work together to keep people from center, the heart. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, Luciferian chaos. What comes to me now is that love on its own is chaos. Love, the power of love, is what powers everything that's ever been thought or instructed or done. Without any light or wisdom to form that love, it is pure chaotic power, right? So we're meant to notice this pure power we are, and then bring form to it, bring it into form, right? Love it. High Strangeness says, have you ever considered the relationship between gravity and time? Yeah, like they're the same illusion, basically. Gravity can't exist without time, and I mean, you said sorry, off topic. It's not. Nothing's really off topic. If you ask it and I read it and I think it's interesting, I'll probably respond if I can. So, oh, and Dan said ego is Satan. Yeah, basically, and ego isn't an entity. It's just constructed beliefs and stuff. So it's not like a thing. It's just a bunch of stuff. It's not a being. But gravity and time, yeah. So gravity and time are both representations of opportunity, but also gravity shows the falling back to Earth, we could say, right? You fall back into God is how metaphysical gravity works. The soul calls home and is drawn home. The path is one path. Like there, you can hide and you can go try to run away and stuff, but ultimately, the metaphysical force of God pulls you home, no matter what you're doing. It does not matter how bananas you get. You're called home. Gravity works that way too. On the Earth, we have a limited gravity, right? Because we're called home to a certain degree. The closer to the sun we get, like think about the sun's gravity, right? And eventually the sun will, if I'm not mistaken, pull everything in, right? Won't it? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but we unify with what birthed us, the mind that birthed us. It all represents sort of the same thing. Everything represents the same thing. It's all symbolic and metaphoric. The reality itself is precisely only that. He says, I saw or heard somewhere that they were saying that tarot and the archetypes of tarot are from Venus. Yeah, that's correct. Yep. We only brought the major arcana. The minor arcana is an Earth thing. The major arcana was brought from Venus. The minor arcana wasn't. High Strangeness says, the sorrow of blatantly obvious when whales beach themselves in record numbers. They can feel the Earth's sorrow as well. Yeah, actually, thank you for bringing that up. A lot of the mammals in the ocean are like third density beings now, awake, like no different from a human really, but they're whatever their species is called, a mammal, water mammal, whale. What do we call them? Porpoise? I don't know what these things are called. But a lot of them are conscious. Dolphins, like you can, if we go study dolphins, we'll notice it. They probably have already. I really don't know. But the dolphins are, yeah, they're running around. They're basically people, little people swimming around. They're like the closest things we have to mermaids. I think I've talked about that before on the channel, but Satan comes from Ha-Satan. Yeah, Ha-Satan. Exactly. Set. Exactly. Satan is the opposer. Greed is Satan. Could be. Yeah, like greed is ego. Like anything that is opposing the truth of God. Yeah. Dan says, exactly, love without wisdom is where we are now. Yeah. We're very loving beings. We care way too much about what everyone thinks. We're so loving that we like forget ourselves because we're like so obsessed with what everyone else thinks, that because we're so open-hearted, right? But who cares what people think? We care about the heart. We care about how people feel, like not their opinions. Like opinions are just it's not real. It's not real. So who cares, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm alone. But I think opinions are fun. Like it's good information. It's great to have chats with people. But opinions are just it's hard to think of it as anything but judgment, really. Arrogance. For us to really for us to hold on to an opinion. It's kind of arrogant, I think. E says that's interesting with the chakras talk. I felt for me, chakra work hasn't been a linear progression from just the root up. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not generally linear that way. You generally speaking, your core distortions are in the root chakra first. And if you were to just pull that out, you would go into psychosis. Your reality would fall apart. So you tend to go to the solar plexus and then to the the orange or the sacral chakra. You tend to go all over, because if you just if you think about it, if you're demolishing a building, you want to make sure it falls down as pure, as cleanly as it can, right? If you're the soul or the higher self that's guiding the demolition of this building, which is basically what's happening, the soul and higher self together are facilitating the demise of the identity that thought it was a separate self running around the place, which it is not the case. So it has to break that building apart. And it does it as best as it can figure how. And some souls are better at it. They're more experienced at it. They're quicker at it. We can't teach it really, other than doing something like what I'm doing, which is trying to mostly tell people to stop worrying so much and stop taking it all so seriously and to stop freaking out about things. There's nothing to worry about. Everything's good. It's funny. It's nothing but funny. It's just absurd. And people don't like that, really. They don't like when we say that the pain isn't that funny that we're an infinite being and we're in all this pain and suffering? Like even just today, I had a horrible day. I don't want to say that. I had a day that challenged me deeply, and I was literally thinking, wow, I haven't had a real challenging thing in like forever. And I was literally thinking that in the morning. It's as if the universe is just ready to humble us right away. Before we even realize we need to be humbled, we're humbled again. So Dan says ego is your left hemisphere. You need light to physically knit the two hemispheres together. Yes. Actually, the pineal gland is what allows the brain to unite the hemispheres. And that, just maybe to get a little esoteric here, a little weird, that only allows the human perceptions to see what is already being seen by the soul. I hope that makes sense. The soul is already seeing that. The human self, or the serpent self, the reptilian self, people don't like that, but we're essentially reptilians, most of us. That self is not aware of awareness, right? Which we can all remember experiencing. We're not aware that there's like a separate, or that we're not a separate self. We're not aware of that. So when we have the hemispheres come together, what we're actually doing is allowing the animal aspect to become a part of the actual divine plan that it didn't even know about before. That's really all that's happening. Like that, all that stuff was already going on the entire time. Everyone's wide awake, in other words. I think I've said that before on the channel, but the idea that people are actually asleep is like an illusion. Like the soul's wide awake watching. Like God, you could say, is seeing everything. It's not like we have moments where God's there and like other moments where God's not there. Like the presence and awareness that we are in truth is there the whole time, right? Personally, it felt more like it's a root up and down simultaneously meeting in the center of the heart. Yeah, it feels a bit different. Like we can describe it in a lot of different ways. Some of us see like just a continually spiraling up. Some of us see it like coming down. It isn't super important how we experience the Kundalini or the chakra work. And I don't know why, but I want to talk about spiritual bypassing right now. This is one of the most interesting things that the ego or spiritual egos come up with recently. We are not able to spiritually bypass. Like, it's not possible to bypass. What's happening is spiritual people are observing things in themselves, and then they're seeing the same problem in another person. And then what they do is they say, oh, that person is not healing this issue. They must be bypassing. We start to see evidence in our reality that people can ignore their problems. Now, the reason that spiritual bypassing is not possible is because the reason that the bypassing occurs is because we don't know. We don't realize that we're bypassing. Think about any time that you might have thought you were bypassing and you were like, oh, shit, I must have been bypassing. Oh, no, you just weren't aware. That's not a real thing. Bypassing what arises, and think about your emotions day to day. Do you pick and choose where they come from and what arises and what doesn't? No. So how could you possibly bypass an emotion that's gonna arise? Because who draws your emotion to you? Spirit and your soul. There's no healing that occurs other than through spirit. And if any healing happens, spirit brought it. If healing doesn't happen, spirit could have tried to bring it, but the soul might not have been ready for that. That's not bypassing. That's divine timing. The soul's not ready. If it was ready, it would just take it. It would have it. It would experience the healing of some kind. So I get frustrated because the ego and the spiritual ego in our humanity is like so demanding and nuts. Like spirituality should sort of be the opposite. Be like, oh, I'm a child of God who is well loved and well received. What should I really worry about? What could possibly be the anxiety if God is on my side? Oh, peace. That's the feeling of God, right? So spiritual bypassing doesn't make any sense. We can pretend it does, but by pretending that we're bypassing, what we're actually doing is empowering our ego to believe that there's someone here who can bypass spirit's livingness through us. There isn't anyone here to get in the way of that. That's the ego, which isn't a thing, right? So who's bypassing? Who bypassed? The ego bypassed? The ego doesn't know what the fuck's going on. The ego is the voice after that explains after the fact. Reality happens, reality is, now is, and then the ego chimes in later, after. The ego has no idea. No idea. Dan says, I feel like I've got a magnet stuck in my forehead. Yeah. Yeah. I feel you, brother. Sarah says, I felt that when my Kundalini woke up, my right brain was so wide open I couldn't read anything for months. Yeah, there's been a balancing and acclimation since. Yep, absolutely. Well, we can find that on either side, and we can have trouble talking, walking. All of it is possible. All of it's possible. I think Dr. Hawkins goes into it in Transcending Levels of Consciousness, if anyone's interested in his books. Apologies to the community. I have adult ADD. This is my first live chat. No apologies. It's great. It's great. I'm a firm believer that now is what matters. So if the questions now or the things coming up now don't have to do with the topic that I wrote down, what do I care? I barely even know what I wrote down for the topic. We talk. That's how we are here. All is well. Sarah says, I agree that that perspective of bypassing, there are things I couldn't process a couple of years ago. I told myself a story about it, came back after some growth, and my big girl panties. Yeah. Yeah, like, can't we notice that some of the shit that we've processed maybe more recently, like, if that came up 3 years ago, we would lose our fucking minds, right? We would. Because it was too much back then. We didn't bypass it. We weren't ready for it. Why do we shit on ourselves? We don't have to do that. It's silly. It's an illusion. We don't need to get all worked up about how fast we're going. Time's not real. Like, what are we even bypassing? It doesn't make any sense. So any teachers talking about any of that, just it means they're confused. I don't know. We want to judge no one, but we want to discern what fruits we want to eat, right? What sustains us. I don't think any of us feel good about this bypassing thing. Nothing about that has a good, inspiring meaning of any kind to it. Therefore, it could not be real. It just couldn't be. If it's of God, it's going to inspire us somehow. It might not be comfortable, but discomfort and negativity are like different things. You guys have been beautiful. I think that's about time. Oh, and high strangeness. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your, what did you say, ADD comments? ADD is ADHD, whatever we call it. Superpower. Superpower. You are bringing through what people want to hear about, generally. However, we don't want to be the at them, but generally speaking, you're picking up on the thoughts of people around you. It's okay. There's lots of thoughts. None of them are ours. None of them are ours. It's all just thoughts flying around, clouds. That's all. So we can pick and choose which ones we want to get into. If we're struggling with attention and thoughts, and many of them, and we can just stop worrying about them so much. Like, we can just be like, oh, I'm not the mind. I'm not the mind. I'm not the mind. So whatever the mind's doing, it's fine. It doesn't really have anything to do with me. It's just, it's like a computer. It's like it's like an answering machine. It's just a robot talking or something. You can start to ignore it, start to deal with it. Thank you guys so much. So much blessings. SOLI Deo Gloria. Loving you all. Take care.